Iedere vrijdag Adebiat, een programma van Massoud over literatuur.
My first poem is called Milk, and it covers two themes that crop up very frequently in my work. One is about adoption and about the necessary losses of being adopted and of being a mother who has had, if you like, to borrow someone else's child. And the other is about growing up in the wartime, and there are a great many wartime images in this poem. Milk. She never smelt of milk. Sweat and sometimes fear crackled like burnt paper behind her overall. When the doodlebug's clockwork stopped, quiet as a feather, and she crammed my face into butcher's sawdust, pine and greasy blood. When I coughed, or wouldn't coax cold gobs of cod into my mouth, squared off to cry. When in my new stilettos and sugar-starched slip, creaking like ice, I limped home after midnight. When my father, twisting in the smoke of pain, refused to die until she said the word, crossly at last. When lavender soap, clean sheets, stale air and disinfectant replacing sweat, she stared down death like Jack in its box. But worst, when her breasts ached, I roared, the landlady tutted, my borrowed father sighed. She never smelt of milk.
Dag, dames en heren. Ik heet Massoud. Mijn programma heet Adebiat. Adebiat betekent literatuur. Als elke week heb ik een gast. Maar deze week we hebben één probleem. Mijn gast praat Engels en ik kan niet. Dus misschien wij praten met twee talen. Dus misschien, ik weet het niet. Wie weet. We gaan door. Welkom.
Thank you.
Hoe
Bedankt.
heet jij? Ja, graag.
Ik heet Kate Foley.
En wat doe jij hier in Nederland?
I came to the Netherlands 3 years ago to live with my partner, who is a Dutch woman. Before that, I'd lived and worked in England all my life. So I'm trying to learn Dutch, maar is heel langzaam.
En wat is jouw achtergrond? Jouw kindertijd, jouw...
Okay, my background. Well, I was born in 1938 to an unmarried mother who, as was common in those days, had me adopted. So when I was 2 months old, I went to my new parents, and much of what happened in my childhood and early life is connected with that particular event, which was difficult, I think, for my parents and for me. And also, of course, in 1939, along came the Second World War. And my family stayed in London throughout the Blitz. So my first playgrounds were the streets where bombs had fallen and made big holes like teeth coming out in the street where houses had gone, where we could play on bombed buildings and generally have exciting games, and where very often school was interrupted because the school had been bombed, where every night we slept in a shelter in the garden, in a little hole in the ground. So it was an exciting time, and I don't think I understood fully how difficult a time it was. But now, writing from the perspective of more than 50 years ago, many of those images recur and crop up in my poetry.
Heb je nog pijn van deze tijd?
Pijn?
Ja. Voor jouw kindertijd?
Yes.
Bombardement.
But I think the bombs were a background, and children were used to bombs. They were used to the noise. I was very not often afraid, and I think that was due to my parents, who were very British about the war and very strong about it, and didn't show fear in front of me. So on the whole, although it was an anxious time, it's not a time that I remember as a time of great fear. More of cold and not too much to eat.
En gebruik jij deze tijd in jouw achtergrond, in jouw gedichten?
Yes, there's quite a lot of wartime images still in my poetry, and I think, having lived through a major war, it makes you sensitive to wars that are going on in the world around, and that comes in sometimes into poetry as well.
Wanneer begin je gedicht schrijven?
I was 11. When I was 11 years old, I passed the scholarship and bourse,
Yeah, yes.
for a convent school, a gymnasium, met de nonnetjes. The nonnetjes and I did not agree very well because they had very prim and, they wanted you to be ladylike, and I was never a very ladylike child. So my time with the nonnetjes was quite short, and I left school when I was 15 and went into hospital because I got tuberculosis immediately after that. But the one thing that I brought with me from school was a love of literature and the beginning of an ability to write. And I found writing always a tremendous pleasure and excitement.
En jij heeft archeologie gestudeerd.
Yes, that was
Maar
much later.
Waarom archeologie?
I think you were right to pick up on archaeology because archaeology, of course, is about the past and about the strata of the world's past, but also it's connected with one's own past. And I think that memory and the strata, if you like, of the past and my past are things which quite often occur in my poems.
En waarom veranderde jouw niet afgelopen jouw opleiding op universiteit? Niet afmaken?
It was because... waarom? Sorry?
Ja, waarom niet?
Waarom niet?
Ja.
Wanneer ik was een meisje. Because my parents were poor, because there was no tradition in my family of education, because they didn't expect me to stay at school after 15 or 16, so I had to leave, but also I was sick. So I went into hospital at that point with lungs, tuberculosis.
Oh.
Yeah. But after that, I did many things. I became a nurse and a midwife, so I've delivered many babies in my time, and that comes into my poetry from time to time too. That connection with birth and death, which I've experienced at very close hand. But I always missed not having an education. So later I went to university and studied, and I was very glad that I did, because after that I had a long career in archaeology and restauratuur and conservation.
En je gebruikt archeologie in jouw gedichten?
Yes. From time to time, in fragments. I never write a whole archaeological poem, but images from archaeology come into my poetry from time to time.
En wanneer begint je jouw eerste gedichten gepubliceerd?
Mijn eerste gedichten were published in the 1960s for a very well-known, in those days in England, magazine called Socialist Commentary, and they happened to have a good poetry editor. So I sent 3 or 4 poems to them, and they accepted them at once. But then I didn't publish. I didn't even try to publish for another 20 years or so. I don't know why. I think I was very busy living my life and starting late on an academic career. And although I always wrote, it never seemed to be important to be published. Now, when time is getting shorter, I feel it much more important. And I have begun, as you see, to publish.
Jij hebt 2 prijzen gekregen. Kan je voor ons uitleggen?
Yes,
welke datum?
I won second prize at the Lincoln Festival.
Voor eerste keer second plaats.
De eerste plaats was...
De eerste keer?
De eerste keer was the Lincoln Festival in 1984. That was the tweede plaats.
Ja.
Maar 2 prijzen met eerste plaats. One was a prize called the Margot Jane Memorial Prize, and I won first prize in that. And 2 very well-known poets were the judges. One was Ursula Fanthorpe, who's written very nicely about my book on the back.
Kan je misschien iets voor ons lezen voor deze boek? Dit is jouw eerste boek.
Dit is mijn eerste boek en dat is mijn tweede.
Hoe heet jouw eerste boek?
Only Women Press.
Ja, hoe heet die eerste boek?
Only Women Press.
Ja.
Yes.
Ja, kan jij iets van dit boek voor ons lezen?
From the book itself, poems. Yes. Okay. You want me to read poems, gedichten? No. Yes. Yeah. We finished talking. Yeah. Okay. So, the first poem from my first book is called Gone, and again it deals with the issues of memory and the past, and how present the past is in our lives, and what use we make of the past too. Gone. Is anything ever gone? Or does it just bound like a skimmed pebble, leaping over the sea's rim, round and miraculously back? I know when I hear gorse pop, that dry, flat sound, and see its yellow, shrill on a dull day, that goldfinches, agile as crotchets, will always burst from the bushes of childhood, where I collect seed, foraging with my father between road and reservoir. Always, not so resonant as gone, that round, portentous J. Arthur Rank sound. Will I always fritter the dock's dry brown heads into my paper bag, my mother flickering like summer lightning, cooking Sunday dinner a mile away? Home to Itmar, a smell of roast meat, the dark brown Bakelite wireless crackling, it tasted of bitter tobacco, my strained antennae swivelling. Always there, packed in flavour and smell, cabbage and bisto, red faces, raised voices, stored in sharp salt and vinegar bites, Smith's crisps, tongue-prickling lemonade, a warm beer fug, the opened door of a pub. Always there, always gone. like the closed door hushed on inexorable hinges, then open in a magnesium flash. I remember always opening on the strong hinge of gone.
Thank you. Kan je nog één gedicht voor ons lezen?
Ja, ik kan. Dit ook van mijn eerste boek.
Ja?
It's about
Okay.
my father's death. My father always, although he wouldn't have acknowledged the fact, always had to ask my mother permission for everything. And in the end, this poem is about her very angrily giving him permission to die, which he couldn't manage to do without. My father counting sheep. He has been awake for long enough counting. His life is thick, painful seconds squeezed from the glass. Stretching his eyes behind the sharp sun's lance, he waits for the terrible medicine of dark. He has his mother's eyes. Often she rapped his head with bony knuckles, her fierce hazel glint searching out sin like truffles. She never cured him of looking, silk in the rag bag, silver in clouds. Now his rib cage winnowed with scorching breath, his big glove puppet hands tell their own story to the sheets. Somewhere in the dry fields of his brain he is driving his last ragged thoughts relentlessly over and over past the same gate, counting to keep awake. What gives him quiet? Not me with my bolus of love and drugs. My mother, her voice shrill with familiar strain, whispers angrily tender, "Let go!" He sighs. His flocks line up soberly. All the mild sheep are folded through his eyes. En dit was de poem van de eerste prijs. Ja.
Ja. Ben je onder druk van welke dichter in Engeland?
Onder druk. Onder druk betekent... Wat betekent onder druk?
Wat betekent onder druk? Indruk.
Indruk.
Onder de indruk.
In Engelse taal.
Which do you think is the best poet?
Oh,
You're impressed by?
very difficult. I'm impressed by many poets, many of them but not all women, and some of them American rather than English. One of my favourite poems is Adrienne Rich,
Ja.
who I think is a magnificent American poet. You probably know her well. There are many good women poets writing in England at the moment. Ursula Fanthorpe is one, Gillian Clarke is another, Myra Schneider, for example, many more. There are interesting young poets coming up. Glenn Maxwell, perhaps one should say. A whole range of poets, and I wouldn't like to pick one off the shelf. It depends very much what I feel like. But I learn most from poets like Adrienne Rich and also like Rilke, whom I can't read in the original, but is a guru for me, very much so.
En wie zijn de belangrijkste dichter op dit moment in Engeland?
Oh, ik weet het niet.
Twee
Dat
van-
hangt af whether you think importance is significance to many people, or whether you're talking about, for example, the poet laureate, who is paid a job, paid money for
Yeah.
being the Queen's poet, or whether you think someone like Ted Hughes, who was a very fine poet, but one of the few poets who earned a living through poetry, or Seamus Heaney, another very well-known poet. But I prefer to look among some of the, if you like, quieter poets, who year after year produce significant poetry that makes a difference to people. And I think U.A. Fanthorpe is one such poet. Anne Klausenaar is another. Anne Stevenson is another. Gillian Clarke is a very fine Welsh poet. Yes, a library full, in other words.
Hoe heet jouw tweede boek?
A Year Without Apricots, published by Blackwater Press, a different small university press this time.
Ja?
Yes. That came out last year. And so far, it's had some very good reviews, which I'm pleased to have had.
In jouw boek is hier twee namen.
Yes,
twee
namen.
Van de vrouwen, twee vrouwen.
Ja?
Wie zijn die twee vrouwen?
Ze zijn mijn moeders. Mijn eerste moeder
Ja?
en dan my adopted mother.
Kan je een beetje voor ons...
Yes. I told you, I think, before that I was adopted very young. But this year, more than 60 years later, I have had contact for the first time with my blood mother, my first mother. She lives in America.
Ja?
And she is now 87 jaar oud.
Ja?
But she's as sharp as a tack. Very, very bright woman. When she gave me for adoption, she was a domestic servant. After that, she went through the war, and I discover she was a sergeant in the Women's Royal Air Force in England during the war. Later, she married an American serviceman and went to America. And I now have 3 letters from her, and it's been wonderful to make contact with this woman who is old but very bright and very determined, and someone I feel almost that I know. Although the last time I saw her, I was 3 weeks old, in fact.
Ben jij moeder? Ben jij?
Nee.
Nee, oké.
Nee.
Kan jij van dit boek een paar gedichten voor ons lezen?
Ja, ik kan. Now. Yes. This time I'd like to read a love poem. And the title is Here's the House, Where's the Steeple? And that is a game that children play in England. It goes like this. Here's the house, where's the steeple? So that's where the image in the poem comes from. Here's the house, where's the steeple? How do I know your hands tell me the truth? Because mine cannot lie. Stripped of carefulness in the strong disinfectant of truth, they're naked, no longer ready for easy, familiar gestures, for wooing or soothing when they should fall silent in my lap. When your hand crept cold, sweaty, trembling into mine, no words were said. But mine, trembling back, confirmed the invitation. Your hands are limber, nimble, good at making Gothic steeples, while mine make Roman arches. But used to the last resource of touch, each neuron fired, fingers speaking in tongues. Our hands lie resting quietly after the work of love, in the earned interlace of silence.
En nog één?
Nog één? Yeah. So that's a love poem, and this is about growing old and growing through the menopause. It's called Red Shift.
Ja,
Ja?
Greenblauw. Groene bloed.
Yeah. Glass so red it holds the whole falling sun is only copper shavings in a clear matrix. But when I put my fingers to my crotch and they came away scarlet for the first time, when my mother showed me the stained yellow yolks soft from a hen's secret sacked, when my hands dipped in birth blood and a baby flooded crimson with its first cry, red had entered my hopes, fat and tasteable as a pomegranate. And now that red is an absence, though its metal taste and rich smell once ripened in every room, now that it has blackened like old varnish, I need to find common nouns on the other side of colour that will stand up, plain and bleached, to be my furniture and luggage.
Dank u wel voor hier komen. We hebben nog 2 minuten.
Ja?
We hebben nog 2 minuten.
Yes.
Ik ga afsluiten onze programma.
Ja.
En ik wil graag jou voor het laatste moment voor ons een gedicht lezen. Dames en heren, dag, tot ziens en tot volgende week. Alsjeblieft. En dank u wel voor jou voor hier komen.
Dank je wel.
Alsjeblieft.
Yeah. This is an Amsterdam poem about the Vondelpark. Actually, it's about being a foreigner. Vondelpark, Amsterdam. Darkness seeps quietly from spaces in tall, rufous trees, crackling as the winds die. Here a mirrored surface, holding light to the sky. A grey heron, steel-cut still. A flock of parakeets bursts from the drab silver green of a willow. Shattered jade raindrops, exotic as the dreadlocked woman running, high-stepping, knock-kneed like the heron. Evening and autumn take strange and common threads. Little dogs yapping on bouncy pogo legs, voices, the whine and creak of bikes, weave them like muted echoes from a summer pool. Somewhere, in the heart of the ruffled dark, a cock crows goodbye to daylight, and llamas molt gently in their scented mulch of straw, never knowing they're foreigners.
Thank you.
So, that is a